Hi, it's JP Gedeon. Welcome to part 2 of my video on personal actions we can undertake to move us through this COVID crisis and counteract anxiety. In part 1 of this video, I introduced you to what I called the triad of personal mastery. That triad presents us pragmatic, daily, practical things that we could do on a personal level to move us towards mastering anxiety and developing a transformative mindset. If you haven't seen that video, I recommend you access it now, since so many of the things we're going to talk about today are closely related to things in that video, and here's a link for you right there. In today's discussion, we're going to pick up where we left off in part 1 and discuss axis number 3, the rest-presence axis. This axis offsets the other two, and in doing so, brings about the notion of balance, which is a way that we can use all three axes and the activities suggested by them to move us towards wholeness and health. Finally, we're going to introduce one of the most important features of this approach, the one thing that takes a static structure and transforms it into a living, breathing, dynamic, growth-focused approach. And that is the concept of personal vision. The third axis is the presence-rest axis. This axis basically governs what I'm calling the 3 M's: mind wandering, mindfulness, and meditation. In effect, it's a way of resting, finding peace, and engaging the imagination. Now, when I bring up the topic of mind wandering, some people give me skeptical looks, but let me tell you that the research shows that mind wandering actually makes us smarter. And for a number of reasons. First of all, mind wandering is one of the primary drivers of learning mastery. When we learn something new, we apply executive function from top down to grapple with the new idea. But the masterful grasping of the concept, where it becomes ingrained in our being, only comes from allowing our mind to wander on that concept. Another aspect of mind wandering is that it allows us to uncouple from the immediate here and now, and therefore opens the door to creative thinking and out-of-the-box thought. This is especially important when we talk about theory building. And what I mean by that is, when we go through life gaining perspective on what we think is going on, we develop theories as to what we think the situation is. Mind wandering allows us to examine those theories in a creative, free-form way, thereby achieving a form of positive reframing and better adaptation. Lastly, mind wandering is a form of flow in and of itself, and therefore allows us to better focus when we choose to. There is one negative that comes with mind wandering, however, which is that research finds that as we let our minds wander, our thoughts tend to center more on ourselves. Me-focused thinking tends to revolve more around potential fears and dangers in the environment and might increase anxiety. However, in order to offset that are the other 2 M's on this axis: mindfulness and meditation. The second M on this axis is mindfulness. I define mindfulness as a radical presence, a deep awareness of ourselves, of our experience, and of how we are engaging in the world. Mindfulness enhances our classic attention centers in our brains, basically the frontal and parietal lobes. As a result of that, it increases our focus adaptability and helps us better select that on which we wish to have attention. And so, by better being able to focus and on better choosing what we want to focus on, mindfulness helps us gain cognitive control over time. In our last section on mind wandering, I talked about the potential negative effects of me-focused thinking. Well, mindfulness actually serves to counteract those detrimental effects. Me-focused thoughts plus mindfulness often equals moment of deep awareness where we increase our insight. Those aha moments actually serve to increase our sense of cognitive control. That cognitive control in turn enhances our capacity to relax, and therefore fosters better recovery from upset over time and increases our capacity for better empathy. Therefore, in sum, mindfulness increases our capacity to engage, which increases our capacity to be aware and increases our focus, thereby helping us better have insight, transform, and decrease anxiety. The third M on this axis is meditation. I'm defining meditation as a deep silence of the mind, a real state of cognitive rest. Now, in today's world, we talk a lot about balancing our brain by engaging in work and play. But I would challenge that. I don't find balance in that because in both work and play, our mind is still on. A real balance will be time on versus time off. Now, the research on meditation is universally positive. It shows that meditation increases our positive emotions over time. It also increases our span of attention and therefore enhances our focus. It increases dopamine in our brain by activating the nucleus accumbens, which is a part of the brain, and that in turn launches more endorphins into our brain and therefore creates a positive feedback loop of dopamine and endorphins. Now, when we add meditative actions to the me focus that could come in mind wandering, what we find is that we actually reduce inner chatter and silence the inner critic. We can activate positivity, and the combination of mind wandering, mindfulness, and meditation moves us from a me focus to a we focus. Now, just a couple of words on balance. I promised you I would talk about this earlier. It is not that each of the axes have to be cultivated in and of themselves. It is the balance of the three. And when we over-focus on one, we reach a state of imbalance that can really be detrimental to our transformative health and to our anxiety. If we overemphasize the presence ability axis, we arrive at what I'm calling ambition blindness, which is a form of drive that blinds us to relational and contextual information that would really help us maintain balance. If we overemphasize the rest ability axis, we end up in what I'm calling indolence. In this state, the very important daily responsibilities we have that do in fact provide meaning, the very discipline that is required to run the minutiae of life is subjugated to those things that we happen to feel are more fun, are more playful, perhaps because we get a bigger hit of dopamine from them. And therefore, people that engage in indolence do not properly manage life's details, and thereby over time increase anxiety and decrease transformative leverage. If we overemphasize the presence rest axis, we end up in what I'm calling disengagement or absence. In essence, this is a retreat from the real world, taking refuge in an imaginary world, thereby turning our backs to the real responsibilities and insights that face us every day, which will, in fact, increase anxiety and decrease our capacity to truly manage the pressures we experience. Now, there's a kicker to all this. You might say, so is that the triad of personal mastery? And my answer is yes, but there's one more thing. The triad as currently presented to you doesn't move. It's a static structure. And although that is helpful, true transformation and the counteracting of anxiety requires growth and movement. And for that, I add one more dimension: vision. I define vision as an understanding of what it is that you wish life to be, and a movement towards that very clear goal. It is a reframing of who we are towards self-actualization and towards contentment. So vision asks, who do you want to be? Where do you want to go? What does this life mean to you? It is an individual effort that leads to self-actualization and expansive contentment. Now, when we add vision to the triad, we end up with an array of activities that move to the next level of being, the evolutionary and transformative level. The first axis of the triad was the presence-ability axis that I called work or task or executive function. When we add vision to that axis, we move up to the evolutionary state of career or goal or development, drive, expansion. When we add vision to the ability-rest axis of the triad, what we find is that embodied play transforms into art, athletics, health, nutrition. And when we add vision to the rest-presence triad, mind-wandering, mindfulness, and meditation transform into imagination, inspiration, and motivation. Together, the triad of personal mastery and vision create a positive feedback loop that inform one another. Vision transforms the very bases of our triad, which later will increase vision. And slowly, together, through this interplay, create the very foundation of personal evolution and our capacity to better manage anxiety, fear, and stress, and increase our transformative leverage through this crisis and every other coming forward. So you might ask, so is that it? Is that the key? Is that all I need to do to better manage through this crisis? And of course, the answer to that is no. What we've talked about today are personal things that we can do ourselves to help us better manage, but obviously the key cannot lie within us only. Everything that we do is also relational and contextual. But let me remind you of this pyramid. This pyramid of transformative thought is based on the personal level, so what we talked about today is the grounding upon which everything else will be based. Every action that we do personally builds the foundation for relational, corporate, and existential capacity, as well as our ability to reduce our anxiety. Each of these actions helps us build character, and most importantly, each one fully takes stock of each of the things on the list that we started by laying out. So I want to harken back to the words of Mother Teresa. She said, "We cannot do great things. We can only do small things with great love." If the actions we talked about today seem boring to us, perhaps dopamine addiction is getting the better of us. And if the actions we talked about today seem trite to us, perhaps we have lost sight of the meaning that we can find in the minutes of life. By small things, I mean the daily actions we have to undertake, no matter how minute. And by great love, in this context, I refer to the commitment and passion with which we engage in those daily actions. Through those, we can achieve a degree of self-possession, a reduction in our anxiety, and a movement towards self-transformation. As always, if there is something in this video or former videos that you'd like more information on or something you'd like to discuss, please leave me a comment down below. I will definitely get back to you, and if there's enough interest, I will put together a video on the topic and post it. Also, please consider subscribing to this channel, as I would very much appreciate it. So until the next video, please stay well and stay healthy. Bye-bye.